Very early on in my career, I had just started my office. I was very interested in doing environmental work with my architecture, but at the time I didn't really know what that was about. I met my now partner, Henry Gifford, who took me through a whole bunch of New York City boiler rooms and started showing me all the problems that happen with badly designed and badly installed mechanical systems inside of buildings. And it was a huge awakening for me, like, duh, if I want to do environmentally sound work, I really need to get in touch with the energy piece of what's going on in buildings. This wasn't really something that architects were being educated about at all at the time. So being taught by Henry about the mechanical piece was really exciting. But as we started to do our work together, we realized there were other components of the building that make the building a system, and we sought to figure out how to get the building working as a system. We started really figuring out the rest of the pieces of the system of a building. My first stop was an AjOhp conference where I went to my first lecture by Joe Steebrook and started really learning about what goes on in a building enclosure. And boy, was that an eye-opener. I came back from that conference super excited because now I had another piece of the system. And then another piece that we hadn't really touched was ventilation. And through ventilation, I met people like Gary Nelson and Terry Brennan, who schooled me and spent a lot of time with me teaching me about those pieces as well. So I started to pull these things together, and at the time, this was in 1996, there was a lot of work being done in the home performance industry, single-family homes. So my job, as I saw it, was to take that work and look at how apartment buildings could benefit from it. And really, in the end, what I've discovered is that an apartment building is just a series of single-family homes all stacked on top of each other. And that's the idea I take into the buildings. I compartmentalize my apartment buildings. Each apartment has its own separate air barrier around it. When I can, I try to have individual systems, although we do use centralized heating systems in a lot of the work we do. But over time, the work and the thinking about it has gotten deeper. We've explored many different ways of exploiting the positive parts of the system of a building to the point now where we're doing very radically energy efficient buildings. I found this idea that the building works as a system to be so intriguing that after starting work on our first buildings, there was really no going back. We started our work with substantial gut rehabs, and we used a lot of the methods that are, it's almost natural that people use these systems these days, but we, at that time, were doing some very radical stuff. We created an air barrier, we compartmentalized apartments. We had heating systems and air conditioning systems with room-by-room thermostatic control. We mechanically ventilated in controlled ventilation systems, and we used fans and motors with the tiniest electrical loads to create a very elegant bunch of mechanical stuff, and in conjunction with building envelope that would reduce the energy use in the building, improve health, and improve durability. And we would build our projects, and because at the same time I was learning from my mentors, we would invite people to come and take a look at the buildings, and they were actually fascinated to see us putting all this stuff into practice. And I was able to really enjoy great relationships with a lot of very fascinating people. So as time went on, our jobs became more and more complex. We moved from substantial gut rehab to new construction. And in new construction, then we kind of took the same ideas, but moved them over to a new construction format. And again, these buildings had an air barrier, continuous insulation, reduced mechanical systems, room by room thermostatic control, a few added things that were Henry Gifford's design, like putting a boiler on a roof, because he knew that that saved maybe up to 30% of the heating energy, which was in buildings where the boiler was in the cellar, would be losing about 30% of the energy right up the chimney. And after a year into the occupancy of our first new construction buildings, we learned that we were using about somewhere between 25 to 10% of the energy of typical buildings in New York City. And this was all code minimum work at the same price of typical construction. And we accomplished it just by being smart and using the things that we had learned. So we knew that what we were doing worked. And we had very few callbacks on our new construction buildings, and word started to spread about this. It really became a topic at a lot of conferences. First thing was, well, how do you do this for the same cost as typical construction? And so we would tell the story, and the story was, we're putting more work into the building enclosure, and we're spending less money on the mechanical systems. And this has kind of been the prevailing way that we've been looking at the buildings ever since. And some point around 2005, I learned about Passive House, and by 2008, I was starting to use Passive House designing in my buildings. So that was a real upgrade in what we were doing, because we were using heavier insulation. We were using energy recovery ventilators for the first time. We were still ventilating apartment by apartment, not with central systems. On our first Passive Houses, we used room by room thermostatic control, as we had done in the past, and then also window air conditioners. And we were able to deliver Passive House compliance in an apartment building in New York City for the same price as typical construction. We purposely asked our client, who is a not-for-profit, to not take any energy subsidies for the work for the construction of the building. And this building is 803 Knickerbocker in Brooklyn. And my client agreed to do this, to not take any subsidies from NYSERDA or any other place, so that we could show that we could do this work for the same price as typical construction. And this was a huge breakthrough when we actually accomplished what we set out to do, because the city of New York is now really looking seriously at taking a huge jump into Passive House construction. And they really, I think, knew that they could start to take it seriously when they saw that it could be done for the same price. So it's an extremely gratifying choice that we made. And now almost every job that I have in my office is highly energy efficient, Passive House compliant, designed to the Passive House standard, or using the Passive House techniques. My career in this has been incredibly rewarding. At almost every turn, we've looked at how things are, and we've tried to figure out, if we need to, how to change things, how to change laws, how to change perceptions, how to make things work, how to invent things. And so there's been an incredible amount of stimulating stuff that's gone on over time. New inventions, changes in the code, lots of teaching, lots of learning, lots of back and forth, international conversations. And I can't say more about how incredible it's been to be involved in this industry.